Hi everyone, my name is Nomkhosi Xulu-Gama and welcome to my YouTube channel and Notes from my pad. So as I have said in the previous video, this is book review week. So I'm going to spend the next 5 days uploading videos whereby let's just say I review books. Okay, so I've chosen 5 books that I'm going to be dealing with each day of this week, just between Monday and Friday. Okay, so the one that I'm going to start with is Whites and Democracy in South Africa by Roger Southall. Okay, so the way I've chosen those books, basically, it's an easy way to suit me. Firstly, okay, so the three book reviews that I'm going to do from the books that I've read and reviewed and probably published, okay, and publish the book reviews. And then the other one is going to be from my own book, Hostels in South Africa. I'm basically going to be reading out probably just 1 or 2 maybe reviews because it has a few reviews. I'm going to be reading about 2 reviews for you guys, the reviews that my book has received. And the 5th one is a book which was published like 10 years ago, which I've only read for the first time like at the end of last year. So I'm reading the book again now because I'm using it for my other work. So this one I have not written a full review, and I'm probably not planning to review the book, but I'm gonna write a paper. I want to write a response paper to the book. So maybe what I'm gonna tell you guys in the video when I'm dealing with that particular book is my response, more like a summary of my paper, which I'm currently busy with. Okay, so the book that we're dealing with today is this one, Whites and Democracy in South Africa by Roger Southall. I'm gonna try and keep all the videos to 10 minutes. Okay, so in this case, I've submitted this book review, which I'm gonna be sharing with you guys, and it's gonna be probably up in a week or so. Definitely by next week, I think it will be up because they already gave me the DOI. So I submitted this book review, funny enough, at the beginning of this year. So the journal has been quite fast in responding, in responding to the book review and in getting it out. So this book was written and published in 2022. I got my hands on this book through the publisher. The publisher sent the book and asked that it be reviewed. So I agreed, and I wasn't too confident because I don't think I'm an expert of race as an issue or as a research issue, but yeah, I agreed nevertheless. So I read the book like early last year, and I just thought it was very difficult to deal with this book, to read the book, to engage with the book, and definitely to review the book. So I read the book and I drafted the review, and I just, I stayed with the review for actually the whole year. I wasn't too confident with what I wrote. And then at the beginning of this year, I had many ideas about what I could have done with that book review that I had written. At the beginning of this year, then I just decided to send it out. And like, what, Nomkhosi, you've done this, just send it out, So that's what I'm going to read for you guys, which is going to be up online by next week or so. Okay, so yeah, the name of the book is Whites and Democracy in South Africa. Okay, maybe let me put my laptop here. Okay, the name of the book is Whites and Democracy in South Africa by Roger Southall. It was published in 2022 by African Sun Media, and it was reviewed by Nomkhosi Xulu-Gama. Okay, so I'm just going to read word for word from what I've written here. At the start, I would like to declare that this book review is unavoidably reflective because of my positionality and reflexivity. I commend Roger Southall for writing about white people and whiteness in South Africa. Having done sociology for undergraduate and postgraduate studies, I always ask myself, why is everybody writing about black people? Aren't people interested in investigating white people and their problems, if any? This book has done exceptionally well in providing a useful history of whites in South Africa, and it presents a range of narratives of whiteness, with each competing to explain and promote a view of how being white should be construed in the new dispensation, which is the democratic era. The eight in-depth interviews, the 8 in-depth focus groups rather, that were conducted across 4 provinces have been able to represent the different voices of white people in terms of age, geographical location, income groups, whenever these were declared. And the primary data collected and analysis of existing literature, both local and international, mostly American literature. They add an important framework in interpreting the myriad realities of white people as documented by the focus group interviews. This is a relevant book, I argue. It is informational and sometimes educational. Regardless of the color of your skin, it exposes you to views and narratives that you might not be aware of, or those that you might not also be comfortable with. Southall is an emeritus professor of sociology and political science. He has written extensively over the 4 decades about South Africa and its socio-political landscape. Race and class have been among key areas of investigation for him. The issue of race in South Africa continues to be a sensitive one. It is always easier to avoid the issue of race because no matter what you say, it's easy to be judged or misinterpreted. What you say is always set against who you are, what race you identify as, and what relationships or influences you have with the other races. So then I want to state my positionality as well so that everything makes sense. I'm a Black female South African emerging scholar, associate professor of sociology, interested in issues of race, class, and gender in South Africa. I research those through the lens of hostels, livelihoods, and higher education. Now that I've addressed my positionality, it is safe to say, going through this book, I inevitably had trigger moments because in South Africa, race and democracy conversations will potentially trigger you. Reading white people's responses triggered painful internal conversations, mostly engaging in asking questions about the implications of what the participants were saying. As much as I am aware of the dangers that it poses at this stage, I'm not convinced that race is a concept that should be discarded or avoided. Although we can continue to use apartheid racial categories, we can avoid associating Black with inferiority and white with superiority. It's not just the words, it's the meaning which is imbued in these words. As much as it's not just the spaces, the apartheid socio-spatial engineering, but it's the power-laden cultural, social, and economic practices that define those spaces and also that define how they look and whether they are serviced or not. The book seeks to find out exactly how do whites in South Africa feel about democracy, especially since the democratic era took away what was freely and fully enjoyed only by white people and kind of almost forced that it be enjoyed by everybody else in South Africa, and that is the political freedom that was distributed equally among all South Africans, regardless of race or creed, regardless of color or creed. Are they genuinely willing participants in a non-racial democracy? The white people, are they? To what extent are they willing to forego the racial privileges of the past and to make the sacrifices which may be demanded of them? Southall posits that the apartheid constructed racial categories is dangerous, and he draws on Gary Murray regarding the concepts of race thinking. The book uses racial terminology because it would have been impossible to forsake them when the core of the book is about one specific category, historically named as whites. The book departs from having to choose between one of the 2 positions. 1. Whites have failed to adapt and remain fundamentally anti-democratic, clinging to their racial privilege. The second position is whites have changed and become willing citizens of post-apartheid democracy and are prepared to forego their racial privilege. So these are the two departure points that Roger sets himself up when he begins to write in the book. Then I would argue that setting up these two positions as a departure point is limiting. The picture is more complicated than that. Although this book does not necessarily locate itself in a relational comparison platform, the findings, to a certain extent, do show relations between blacks and whites, even if there is sometimes shown through African National Congress and or versus the Democratic Alliance politics. Southall declares his positionality as well at the beginning of the book, which is why I felt that it was also important that I declare my positionality. Also because, I did say that the piece is quite reflective, so it makes sense for the reader to understand who is reflecting in this piece. So he declares his positionality, his whiteness, and his origins and belonging. He goes on to argue that most literature on whites is overwhelmingly negative and condemnatory, thereby leaving us to conclude that enough has been said about white people, which is negative. While he argues that focusing on negativity would be blamed for not paying attention on the whites who have responded positively to democracy, he is wary that paying too much attention on the good and democratic whites would be criticized for ignoring the damages that have been caused by whites in South Africa. While he argues that he tries to steer clear of both dangers, I strongly believe that Southall does take an optimistic view in interpreting the findings from his research. For the benefit of the reader, Southall explains the dynamics of the whites from colonization to apartheid. He discusses what brought whites together, which is their whiteness, and what divided them, which is their origins, their history, their ethnicity, their beliefs, and their languages. Southall uses Pozell and Simpson's 2002 work when they investigated the power of truth in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in 2002. They argued that finding the truth was always going to be an impossible task, considering the different peoples, different cultures, competing political affiliations, and therefore different perspectives on the past. He argues that writing this book was like playing around issues of forensic truth and sociological or historical truth at a structural level. These sets of truth indeed require different things, i.e., he says, proof beyond reasonable doubt. The other would be complex, inviting, contradictory politics of compromise. These truths do not capture, he argues, how popular conceptions of truth are forged. For me, this book has presented adequate and relevant data to show how popular conceptions of truth have been forged by white people in South Africa. Regarding blacks and democracy, we have seen a lot of work on black people, as in a lot of written work on black people. Unfortunately for them, the focus is on black people and the ANC, the African National Congress, or it's black people and the black economic empowerment, corruption, townships, poverty, inequality, HIV and AIDS, high unemployment, social grants, crime, substance abuse, black tax, gender-based violence, and among other things. We know that those aspects about black people are negative. Things like BEE, Black Economic Empowerment, which was a democratic move to redress the wrongs of the past, have come to be painted negatively and continue to be challenged by some white people. For those black people who have made it, when they look back and support their families who might have in one way or the other helped in their success, that is named black tax, which definitely has negative connotations. As a people, how do you find the balance between focusing too much on negativity and being unreasonably positive, to the extent that we see a rainbow nation where it is non-existent? Southall, on the other hand, has written a beautiful and useful book about the new black middle class in South Africa, which was published in 2016. This book provides a useful account of the formation of this new black middle class and goes beyond the simplistic and shallow understanding of who the black middle class is, when and how it was formed. For people who might be interested to know whether the white people interviewed in this research by Southall did address the issue of when or if they will bring back the land to the people it was stolen from, The answer is not direct, but one has to read between the lines and find that a few believe that if it is not retained fully, at least it should be shared equally. Further, a similar question can be asked about the use of African languages for white people in South Africa who regard themselves as South Africans. When will they start regarding African languages as equal to colonial languages? Whatever the answer is provided, what does it imply for the issues of whiteness and superiority versus issues of blackness and inferiority? As a closing note, black people reading about whites in South Africa, I wondered about the people who are neither white nor black, but who particularly have whiteness in them. Where does this book leave them? I understand that this is why we have sampling techniques and frames, but I could not resist the question, since we always have to look at other people, at people in relation to each other, and at places in connection to the other places that they are interconnected with. In that sense, I can conclude that perhaps the book was more about difference than diversity. Even for that reason, I believe it is a good sociological book, which does deserve some space in the reading list of the sociology courses in South Africa and beyond. That is a review which I wrote on Whites and Democracy in South Africa by Roger Southall, which is probably going to be up online in the next week or so, like I said, but I'm going to drop the DOI in the comment box below. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you actually enjoyed getting some insights about the book, whether you've read it or not. But if you've read it, tell me what you think. If you're going to be reading it, still tell me what you think and what you feel. Thank you so much. Bye.